How's it going, folks? Welcome back to the CartoRedux channel. My name's Tommy, and today I'm going to try to recreate this map in ArcGIS Pro in 500 seconds or less. Is that enough time to recreate one of these gorgeous maps from my good friend Sarah Bell? Stick around and find out. Now let's level set some expectations here. There's a lot going on in these maps, and I'm probably not going to be able to get to all of it. I'm definitely thinking the bathymetry and tinted hillshade probably not going to happen. I don't even want to attempt to embarrass myself trying to recreate this wonderful little Swainson's Thrush graphic that she's got going on here. I couldn't do it justice if I tried. Now, let's talk about some ground rules. Again, like I said, ArcGIS Pro only. I'm going to put 500 seconds on the clock. When that timer goes off, all I'm going to let myself do is export the map. I'm not going to be doing any finishing inside Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator or Affinity Designer. This is going to... what we get is what we get. Now, I'll also say that this is not going to be my typical ArcGIS Pro tutorial, as I'll be trying to go through as quickly as I possibly can. But stick around to the end because I will do a quick recap where I hit some of the finer points of those time-saving techniques that I used during this challenge. Let's get into Pro. Let's get a little countdown here. 5, 4, 3, 2. All right, here we go. So we've got to get some data. Let's get some data in here. So we're going to grab these and the land and the water bodies. This is coming from projectlinework.org. Add that to the current map. Sweet. That looks gorgeous. And zoom in a little bit here. Now, the first thing we got to do is we got to get this projection looking good. So we're going to get to about there. Center my map there. And for that, I'm going to use this handy dandy little coordinate system thingamajig called the Suggested Projected Coordinate System. That's not a mouthful. I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to be able to keep talking because I've got to really start flying here. So let's do a little bit of rearranging here. Water bodies above that. Land. No. Sloppy. Land. Ranges. Not yet. Water. Ranges. Make these unique values. We're going to key on the type. Get them all in there. Get rid of that thing. Breeding. Migration. Enter. Just got to flip these around so it actually stacks up properly. Do that. That. Water bodies is good. Land is good. Paths. Whew. Here we go. This is going to be direction. Good. That added. Get rid of that. Let's get into fall. Boom. And then let's get into spring. Great. Pretty close, but we got to fix those. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn on symbol properties. Go back to this one. Properties, and we should see a bunch of little connections next to these things. So click on the gradient fill, taper polygon, from with, open up a little expression that I already have built out. Delicious. Let's look at pattern, angle. This one's coming from my good friend Craig Williams because there's a lot of stuff happening here that we'll talk about later. Awesome. Click OK. Apply. Oof. Flying. That looks good. Nice. Do the same thing for spring. From with. We'll get the weight in there. All right. Good. And the angle again. We want to make sure that gradient is going the proper direction along that line. So we got this really cool math stuff that Craig hooked me up with. Sweet. That looks good. Now, let's get this taken care of. So we're almost done with this, but I want to make sure that, no, I just want the paths. So let's click off of that, grab these. I want to make these thick. So let's open up the attribute editor. We can bulk edit these things. I'm going to make these thick. Good. Auto apply, and I want to make these thin. Good. That's done. Let's get a layout. Come on now. Almost there. Custom page. We want this to be 11 by 17. Don't ask me how I know that. I promise Sarah told me I could do this. I'm sorry, Sarah, in advance. Grab that. Alright, let's get this in there. Let's change the dimensions to 11 by 17. Let's get 0 and 0. That looks good. And we also just want to set the background color. Puts an outline on their map anyway. Crazy talk. Alright. Activate this frame. We got 4 minutes. I don't know, folks. Pretty good pace right now, but we'll see. That looks pretty good right there. Good. Now let's dial that one in. Cool. Minimum viable product. Let's get some legend things happening over here. This is spring. Do another one. This is fall. What I'll do is I'll just control click those and go to format. Got some pre-built styles that I want to use. Not that. Nope. Wrong one. This. Maybe? Yes. Good. Zoom in. Place those a little bit more neatly. You get in there. Good. 3 minutes left. Whew, come on now. Almost there. All right. Minimum viable product. Looking good. No more minimum viable product. That's the last time you're going to say that. Range of the. Good. Get it there. Now this is going to be title text 1. I'm going to do another one. And this is going to look a little weird because this is just going to be Wainson's, but I want to use this one instead. Good. Delicious. And then I want to apply title text 2 to that. Get you over there. That doesn't look right. There we go. Title text 1. There's 2 copies of that. Silliness. Absolute silliness, I tell you. Let's do... This is where we get sloppy. Alright, we'll make a copy of that. Drag that down. We're going to put RUSH. Good. And we're going to get 2 more letters. We get a letter S in here. Then we're going to duplicate that. For that one, we'll do the letter T. Good. So which one's which? Which one's which? Fantastic. Get those somewhat saved. Got 1 minute and 46. Almost there. We still got to do the legend. All right, and then for you, you're going to be title text 3. Wonderful. That's pretty close. Let's turn off snapping. I'll get the S cleaned up a little more. Good. All right, legend. Come on. Put that over here. Good. Expand that. I only want ranges. And I don't want that. I don't want that. I want the symbology of ranges. I want to change the swatch to be 1 minute. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. There we go. Let's go back up to the legend. And we want it to be 20 points and 20 points. Ooh, not 220, but just 20. Good. And format the symbol. We want legend. Good. Get right in there. Now, we need 2 more pieces of text and we're all done. 30 seconds. Oh, where to go, where to go, where to go, where to go. Ooh, we got range. This, that, grab it down. Grab that. Migration. Good. That. Format. Oh boy. Oh boy. Sweaty mess right now. That looks good. Not really. But we're there. Last thing we gotta do is... This close. This close. Let's just keep going. The other thing that I want to add is that texture, that nice bumpy texture, because he likes when I steal things from him. From my good friend John. So I'm just gonna pull this one in. Size that, 11 by 17. Anchors down here, there. Now what we need to do is activate that one. Zoom in a smidge. Make sure that we got full coverage. We do. Delicious. All right, great. So we're gonna lock that. I want to do the selecting. There. Do the selecting thing. Let's zoom in a little bit. Get that lined up nice. Grab this one. Snug that in. Give these guys a little bit more breathing room. That looks nice. And there we have it. It's done. So let's export this map. So we're going to do layout, give it a meaningful name, see if we can do a side by side. It's passable. Not too bad. I like it. I hope you like it too, Sarah. Please tell me we're still friends. There are a few things that I couldn't do inside Pro, specifically with the elephant typeface. It does have an italics, but it changes the style completely of the text. What Sarah's got going on over here is just a slight skew to the text, or kind of makes it look more like a elephant oblique. For ArcGIS Pro, I can't skew the characters, so we had to go with the default elephant typeface. But everything else, I mean, aside, I could have spent hours agonizing over this to try to match it precisely to what she's got going on, but not too bad. And for failing miserably at meeting that 500-second mark, I'm still pretty happy with it. A little disappointed didn't get it, but we were so close. I promised a recap. Let's jump into that real quick. So let's get into some of those time-saving techniques that without which this would not even have been remotely possible. All right, so let's go over into Pro. Now, the first thing that we wanted to do was to mimic that really cool projection. I've already got it set up here. You want to get close to the extent of the map that you're trying to mimic and approximate the middle of the map. And again, you could do that just by clicking the scroll wheel if you've got one of those things on your mice. And we go into the map frame properties, coordinate systems tab, and then you want to open up the new suggested projected coordinate system wizard. And based on the current projection of the map, the scale that you're at, you'll be presented with different projection properties or various compromises that you can make for your map. Given that we were talking migration paths for the Swainson's thrush, I figured something that took into account preserving distances. That was the key here. So we went with equidistant from one point. So let's get back to our map. The next key time-saving technique has to do with adding data or referencing data. So if you've got enterprise geodatabase connections, or if you've got file geodatabase connections, you can add those directly to your project. You just right-click on them, add to project. What this saves you is having to pummel through all those directories looking for data. And instead, you get that right in the databases directory up here. Nice. Within a few clicks, you can actually get right to the data that you need for your projects. The next key piece was you can multi-select by holding down Control, land, water bodies, and then bulk add these things to your map. So in one shot or within a few clicks, you can add all the layers to your map. Next, let's talk about styles. So one of the things that I agonized over in previous attempts at this challenge was having to recreate all these colors from scratch, or add these colors from scratch. And while there's ways to optimize that, I couldn't find a faster way than by using styles. So this is just a custom style that I created for this project. And I went through and I populated all the different polygon fill symbols and gave them meaningful names, because when you look at the gallery view of the map, over here, go to the symbology pane. If we click on one of these symbol classes, we can quickly go to the gallery. And now you've got all those predefined styles one mouse click away, which is incredibly helpful. Big time-saving technique there. One other cool aspect about this data set, the ranges polygon that I created, is that I was a bit of an idiot when I created them, and I did them out of order. In other words, I took the migration polygon, I drew it on top of the breeding polygon, and everything just got out of whack. But you don't need to go through and recreate your polygon. You can just enable symbol layer drawing in the symbol layer drawing tab. You can just take the symbol classes that you want, reorder them, and draw them in a way that's more appropriate. Next, the primary motivation for doing this was Sarah's gorgeous flow lines. And if we look at this real quick, they had these beautiful little gradients applied to them. This is what really caught my eye initially. But these flow lines, I've yet to find a way to create something like this directly in ArcGIS Pro. Up until this point, I thought this was only possible inside of a design application like, Photoshop or Illustrator or Affinity Designer. But working with some brilliant folks, we actually came up with a pretty viable solution, and I really like it. So let's dive into how we did that. So first, under the symbology, once again, I had pre-created some styles and used those to set up at least the foundation of what we needed for these flow lines. Now, by default, these are just line features, and by default, you're going to have just the standard stroke symbol layer. But what I wanted to add was a marker layer for the arrowheads, and then I also wanted to add a fill layer, and this is where we would turn that fill layer into a gradient. Problem is that if I just hit apply, the default effect that's applied to the fill layer is this enclosing polygon effect. It has sort of a convex hull, sort of a vibe to it, and that's not what we want. Now you can remove that, and instead the layer effect that we want is a tapered polygon, and that little warning goes away when you do that. So now when we flip over to our layers view, we'll now see these tapered polygon effect parameters, these options to modify and manipulate this. And I just changed this to a gradient fill, modified the gradient properties, which I'll get to in just a second. And then you now have this option to tweak and tune the from width, or one end of the tapered polygon, and the to width, the end towards the end of the arrow. We'll talk more about the gradient here in a second, because there's some pretty cool stuff that we've got to do to make that really work well. So let's look at the shape marker. For the shape marker, I just used the Esri Arrowhead font, and then I chose I think it was number 36. We just do that. We go to marker placement, at extremities, extremities at end. And the key part here is that I had to digitize these lines facing the correct direction. So from north to south for the fall flow lines, and then from south to north for the spring flow lines. I'm just going to remove that marker and the stroke. And again, once you've got these other two layers in here, the character layer, or the marker layer and the gradient fill, you can remove all the extra layers. So I'm going to remove this new gradient layer that we created, and we're just going to look at the one that I've got in there already. So for the gradient, we just choose the same color twice, but we just apply a high degree of transparency to that, so 95%. And then for the actual gradient properties, we choose a linear. We'll get back to the angle here in a second, and then continuous with 100% for the relative size. I'll click apply, get rid of those, and that looks pretty good. But what happens if I just undo this bit of magic? You'll notice that, well, first off, it flips. So let's flip this around. But you'll notice that the gradient doesn't necessarily work for every feature, every line that's in this feature class. And that's because the angle is sort of universally applied to every feature that you've got in that feature class. So you can't control the angle of the gradient that is being applied to that tapered polygon per feature. It's applied, at the layer level. So while it looks pretty good for these north-south, these arrows that are generally running north-south, this arrow out here that I hacked in there for the legend in the layout view, it doesn't look right. We've got the gradient that's flowing, across the stroke as opposed to along the stroke. So how do we fix that? Well, thankfully, there's this wonderful little option here called Vary Symbology by Attribute. And once you've actually made connections, you'll see these things start lighting up in this area down here. But you put a check in this box here for Allow Symbol Property Connections, and it opens up a whole new world of fine-tuning your symbology and making it responsive to attribution that you have. So let's jump back into one of these layers and I'll show you what I mean. Now, when you turn that on, you'll get these little geodatabase can looking things next to it. And this is something where you can come in and specify a specific attribute, or in this case, like I did, where I'm actually going to specify some arcade. It's an expression language that lets you essentially calculate values on the fly, right? Overly simplifying it, which is what I do best. But essentially what's going on here is for this from width, or that, the thicker end of that tapered polygon, I'm going to look at an attribute that I have defined here, weight. It's got two values, or three. It's got thick, thin, or null. And so if the value is thick, I want you to set the from width parameter to 16 points. If it's thin, set it to 8. And if it's null, set the from width to 4 points. That's all it is. Now, the cool thing about expressions is that you can export them and save them for reuse later. All right, as these LXP files. It's just a text file. And then you can just quickly add them back to your expression, which is really cool. Now, once again, I'm going to show you how I did this for the angle. And I cannot claim ownership of coming up with this complex arcade logic. This is actually provided by my very good friend Craig Williams for helping me figure this one out. So thanks, Craig. He's my arcade whisperer. Now, what this is doing is it's essentially calculating the angle from the last point in the line to the next point along the line and calculating an appropriate angle. And this is what makes those, let me flip this around because I know it's going to break it. This is what makes that per feature gradient work, right? So essentially every feature in our feature class, every line, it's recalculating an appropriate gradient angle and applying that on the fly. How cool is that? Okay, almost done. Let's talk about our layout for a second. So if we go over to our layout, we'll open that up. A lot of folks, when they add map frames to their layouts, they're going to come directly through this little map frame. They're going to add it that way. I like to just drag and drop. Another one of my friends on the product team, Aubrey Kinghorn, showed me this a while ago, where you can just drag and drop any of your existing maps into the layout. I'm not going to do that for right now, but really, really cool, really nice time saver right there. And you can resize, do all those fun things. The last thing I want to talk about with this layout is that sort of texture that I applied to it. And this is coming to us from my other friend. Got a lot of friends. I work with a lot of really smart people, thankfully, and I'm just leeching off of their creativity. John Nelson created these wonderful little things called what he termed texture tiles. Right, so if we search ArcGIS Online for texture tiles, you're going to see a bunch of different ones show up. And I've used the watercolor paper texture. Again, going back to Sarah's original aesthetic, it had sort of that bumpily, really nice, rich texture feel of almost like a classic novel dust cover. So yeah, he's got a bunch of different ones. He's got a blog post out that explains how each one of these different texture tiles can be utilized. And I could have just brought that one layer into this map, and it would have drawn on top of all these other layers, and it would have given that nice texture feel to all of those, except if I was in layout view, all the things that I did in the layout view would then be on top of that. So you've got your map frame, and you got all this other stuff that makes up the rest of your map. That would be on top of that texture. So what I did was I just had a second map. I dragged that map into the layout, drew that on top of everything else. That's this map up here. There is one more bonus tip that I almost forgot about. And it has to do with the legend patches, or the actual little symbol patches there. You don't have to go back to the map and modify these things. You could, right? If we go back to the symbology pane, you can hit these little drop downs and pick a different shape. But right from the layout, you can just expand your map frame and you can get back to the same symbology pane. We come in here and change shape. If you want to go with a hexagon, you can do that. but I like my little water body polygon. I know this video is getting a little long, but I promised you a recap because I went way too fast. So there we go. All right, folks, I think that's going to do it. But before we go, real quick, a special thank you to Sarah Bell. Once again, amazing maps. I learned so much just from poring over this map for the past couple of days. And at every turn, there was something new and wonderful that just revealed itself. All these little nuances. Absolutely fantastic work. Thank you so much for letting me potentially ruin it. Hopefully I didn't. Hopefully we're still friends. Second, there is a slight reference to this, or a subtle reference to this that I made that I do want to call out here. ProjectLinework.org and Dylan Moriarty, who's one of the contributors to that project. The land polygons and the water body polygons all come from a data set that he created called Moriarty Hand. It's this delightfully imprecise and just this hand-drawn feel, and it's just, I love it. Go check out ProjectLinework.org. There's a ton of different data sets in there. They're all amazing. Go check them out. Last and certainly not least, my good friend John Nelson, like I said, he created a bunch of these things that he calls texture tiles. He spent a lot of time on this. He's got an awesome blog post here that I'll make sure I link in the description below. Go check that out too. Some really cool stuff that he's made available. So thanks again, John. Appreciate it. And with that, folks, thank you. Thank you for sticking around this long. This was a long one, I know. And I really had a lot of fun putting this together. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Until next time, take care. We'll see you soon.